Hello one and all, welcome back. It's been a minute, I realise. It turns out that moving country and having your first job in the new country not work out kind of affects your motivation for getting side projects done. But, you know, here I am, and I've got a little extra motivation now to get this next bit of work done. Now, I've had a problem with the Amiga 1200. The capacitors definitely need replacing. It was on the list to do, you know, aren't they all? But hadn't got around to it, and the sound went weird. So let me tell you that story now, how we're going to get it fixed, what the symptoms already look like, and we'll go into that. And then for the next video, well, I think it's probably going to be about this. It's a 68030 accelerator card, and I'm pretty keen to see this working. So let's get into it. So I got interested in Metal Gear recently, and I thought to myself, why don't I try it out on the Amiga? It's just been ported, and that would be a fun thing to try out, right? So I'll fire up the Amiga 1200 and see how it is. I'd heard all about the new music. First things first, demo intro. Very crunchy, interesting sound, right? Alrighty, so let's try out some stuff. There's actually an audio menu in here, so you can try out the sound effects. But, do they sound kind of weird to you? We got the music. I mean, again, like, very incredibly crunchy. Doesn't sound right, does it? How about this one? No thank you. And how about the sound effects? Well, that's just a little pop noise. That's a hiss. That's just a weird crunch. Strange, eh? I thought, never mind, I will try out the other computers. So I got out the Amiga 500, and that went to a guru meditation. I've always been a little bit... it wasn't the best condition, that Amiga 500. I'm starting to think it's not quite right. The Amiga 500 Plus didn't want to load, but that has a lot of expansions, so perhaps it's just a bit incompatible. Fine, I thought. After going round a bit, I realised sound problems could be an indication of something going wrong with A1200s. So let's try a known good disc. Oh no, that isn't music at all. Bad news, it's time to open this thing up. Well, nothing too obvious amiss. But I did already buy a recap kit for the A1200. So I think the obvious next step is going to be to change all those caps like I probably should have done some time ago. Will this be another old computer that's just fixed by changing the capacitors? Let's hope so. Okay, so this should be a lot of fun. Looking at it, I can already see, you know, we've got some of these that are really squished in. So you're going to want to take out the big caps first to make room for it. I want to start with the easy ones, the through holes, since I'm used to doing those. Don't have to figure out new techniques. What looks really exciting is how I'm going to get this one. Now, I saw another video where people removed the plastic piece first so it wouldn't get damaged. And that is probably the only way. There's just no way I'm getting a soldering iron in between there, because that's the way around it is. The pad is right next to it. Oh man, I don't want to do that. Still, hopefully that's not too difficult with the desolderer. so that's all the through-hole caps done out. So let's have a go at one of the easy ones of these and see if it's even possible. Both of my soldering irons aren't great, and to be honest, could also use new tips, so this may just be too hard. I do have a friend who's got iHot Air rework station, so I've got to decide if it makes more sense to kind of try and order some solder tweezers or use that with all the massive amount of blanking and capped on taping and everything else, or you know what my approach is going to be. But yeah, let's give this way a go first. The tips on these irons aren't good. I'm not sure if I rate my chances, but let's see how this works. Oh, that was pretty easy. I'm surprised. Okay. So that has some flux on, this one doesn't. Let's see if I need the flux on. Yeah, I think the flux helps a lot. Or maybe it was the fact I pre-soldered the tips. Let's try the flux. I'm not touching that chip, don't like it. Oh, I'm going to scratch the board if I'm not careful. It doesn't need that much effort. Condition of the pads and everything looks good. None of these look like they've leaked. This is worryingly easy. So this little one hidden down here is going to be very tricky. I think maybe I can get the iron onto it though. Let's give it a go. Okay, this one's also fiddly. I think that's the name of this game. Everything's a bit fiddly. You've got to watch two things at once. Come on. Okay, that's that area. Can give it a clean up. Put the new bits back in. Okay, all the through holes are in position, so let's get them soldered up. Here's the point where I'm putting the caps back in. First we have a quick touch to try and set it in place, and then go back to each leg to give a good connection. As with many things in life, good preparation is important. Everything needs to be clean. Let the iron reach its full temperature. Figure out how you're going to access the area and get your solder ready to dispense. And try to do the actual soldering fairly quick. Don't get too much heat into the components. I'm very much an amateur with soldering, but I can tell you if it doesn't go on fairly quick and easy, something in your prep's probably wrong, and more heat and more solder are not going to be the answer. Well, that's all the capacitors back in. It's not the neatest job. This is difficult. The ones that are easy to get to are not too bad, but the ones that are tight are very difficult. And without my desolderer, I would never have got the keyboard connector out. And without getting the keyboard connector out, I would not have got to this little capacitor right here. So yeah, not one for the faint of heart, I think, but should be ready to give a go before I put that difficult keyboard connector back in. So let's see if it powers or not and whether the sound works. Oh, okay, still posts. Bit of funny noise from the speaker though, so let's see. Alright, got the Gotek and a controller connected, so let's see if we can make some noise. Definitely still not right, so I have some other fault. Although the machine is not perfect, the fact it acts exactly as before tells me the recap work is good. So I can go ahead and put the keyboard ribbon cable connector back in. First, get all the legs nice and straight, then pop it into the board. Again, if your prep is right, it goes in smooth. I thought this could be a nightmare. Let's zoom through all these solder joints at 20x and get the board cleaned up. Then, we've got everything back soldered on the board. Next up, the Amiga goes back together. We place the board into the metal RF shield and put all the screws back into the rear panel connectors. Once that's done, we add the top of the shield. They were really serious about RF interference back in the day. It slots on and then you bend all the little metal tabs over to hold it in. The Amiga is almost a single board computer, but there's some things to plug in. The hard disk sits in this metal standoff. You line up the feet with the holes in the board, and there's a single laptop style ribbon for data and power. The Gotek is in place of the floppy drive. It needs power and data and is screwed down in multiple places. Finally, the keyboard ribbon is inserted and we carefully lock down the plastic retainer. And did it all work? Well, as the titles have suggested, absolutely not. Not only was the sound still not working, but with the keyboard plugged in, it did this. What is happening here? Spoiler alert, I took this footage with the machine fully working, and the behaviour is that of the screen switching from PAL to NTSC over and over as if buttons are stuck down. When I did get it into Workbench, only some keyboard keys would work, and they didn't always type what you might expect. Oh no. I eventually figured out that all of this new strangeness was due to the computer thinking the Alt key was constantly being pressed. Okay, well that's something, but why? Had I bridged some solder joints on that keyboard connector? Well, I went over that with a little lens, touched up any soldering that didn't look perfect, but no joy. I cleaned the board again, you know, didn't look completely clean. So I improved that, but the machine's still not right. I think eventually I washed it in the sink and hey presto, back to everything working except the sound. Hurrah, I hadn't made anything worse. But for the first time, replacing the caps had not fixed an old computer. So, the sound, what's up? After much googling and pondering, one of the things I eventually tried was checking with my other Amiga power supply. Remember, these are both ones I refurbished with brand new inids in a previous video, so I thought I could trust them. As the kids might say, Lamau. Works perfectly with my other Amiga power supply. There's nothing wrong with the first power supply I tried. The power supply is putting out the -12 that's missing, but I don't think it's making it through the cable. I think the cable must have a little break in it somewhere. The simplest possible thing it could have been, really. Oh well, the caps needed doing anyway, right? Job's done, Amiga's working, happy times. So, where are we at now? Well, I have a recapped, near pristine Amiga 1200. I even fixed the power LED, which had never worked. It just needed the solder reflowing, even though it kind of looked okay. It's been a lot of work, but this should now be a machine I can rely on, and one that's got decades of life ahead of it. Unlike many, the capacitors in here were perfect. No leakage I could see, and they were either original or a very good replacement job. Could I have just left them alone? Well, who knows, but at least it's now something I don't have to think about, don't have to worry about. Job's done. And all these months later, now I can finally play some Metal Gear. And what is next? Well, as I mentioned, I now have that accelerator card for the 1200, so that's a good candidate for a video. Should be a lot less complicated to make since everything works and I can actually plan it in advance what I want to talk about and show. And on that note, as a peek behind the camera if you're curious, I think editing this whole video has taken me something like 2 or 3 working days. Sometimes wonder if I'm doing something wrong. Perhaps I can find a more efficient way of doing this. It's things like cutting out all the long parts and the repairs where nothing's happening, putting in little explainers and voiceovers so it flows and makes sense, recording extra audio, pieces to camera, extra footage, for the LEDs working again, the working audio output, figuring out things like where to get royalty-free music, combing through the YouTube audio library for pieces I like and fit. And, there's kind of a lot of learning to do. This is by no means a boo-hoo, I need a Patreon and you need to pay me money for me to do this. I enjoy the learning, it's a hobby. But there's so much stuff I just had no idea about, and I guess a lot of people watching don't either. And, I think it's interesting. I like to learn these new skills, and it gives me more of an appreciation for other creators of all kinds of things. So I'll wrap up there, get back to my weekend. So have a good one and happy tinkering.